Tied at his waist was a sack made of animal hide. His eyes were nothing but slits, and he wasn't moving. The icy wind swept through the holes in his clothes, slowly but surely sucking the heat out of his body. Then some raindrops hit his face, and he blinked, revealing that his cold, hawk-like eyes were focused on something a short distance from him. About 20 meters away was an emaciated vulture ripping flesh off the corpse of a stray dog, and occasionally glancing around. These ruins were a dangerous place, and all it would take was a slight bit of movement for the vulture to fly up into the air. The young man was also waiting for his opportunity, like a skilled hunter. It didn't take long for that opportunity to arrive, as the vulture suddenly plunged its head deep into the chest cavity of the dog. The young man's eyes turned extremely cold, and he shot into motion like an arrow from a bow, racing toward the vulture while simultaneously pulling a black iron skewer out of his sack. The tip of the skewer glittered coldly. Perhaps it was that, or perhaps it was the killing intent radiating off the young man. Either way, the vulture sensed it. Flapping its wings in alarm, it flew up into the air. It wasn't fast enough. The young man's face was completely expressionless as he threw the black skewer, sending it shooting through the air in a dark streak. Splat! But the young man was used to it, and he didn't spare the corpses a second thought. In fact, he kept his eyes on the sky. He seemed anxious, as though the darkening sky was more terrifying than all the corpses combined. Eventually, he caught sight of a medicine shop off in the distance. Breathing a sigh of relief, he hurried toward it. It wasn't a large place, and there were medicine drawers scattered everywhere. The place smelled like a mix of medicine and mold, almost like that of a freshly opened tomb. The whole place was a mess. In the corner was the corpse of an old man leaning up against the wall, his skin greenish-black. He had died with his eyes open and was staring blankly out into the world. The young man glanced around and then started rummaging through the place. The medicinal plants in the place matched the corpses. Most were greenish-black. Only a few looked normal. The young man looked closely at the untainted medicine, seemingly searching through his memories. Eventually, he identified a medicinal plant used to treat incisions. Taking off his tattered shirt, he looked down at a gaping wound on his chest. It wasn't healed, and its edges were turning black. There was also some blood seeping out. Crushing the medicinal plant, he took a deep breath and then smeared the paste on his wound. The pain caused his vision to swim, and he shook from head to toe and nearly fell over. Ripping one of the curtains off the wall, he covered the old man's corpse, then left. Upon walking out into the open, he noticed a flash of light up ahead. Stuck in the mud was a hand-sized mirror. Looking down at it, he could see his reflection. His face was dirty, but that couldn't completely cover up his delicate and unusually handsome features. Unfortunately, the innocence one would expect to find in a teenage boy was gone, replaced instead with cold indifference. The young man looked at his reflection for a long moment, then lifted his foot and stepped on the mirror. Crack! He left the shattered mirror behind as he ran off into the distance. Despite being in pieces, the mirror still managed to reflect the light from the sky. Up there, covering the world and overlooking all living beings, was the half-face of a broken god. The face seemed indifferent, with its eyes closed and hair draped down around it. It was a natural part of this world, similar to the sun and moon. Beneath it, the living beings of the world were like bugs, insects, and as in The Awakening of Insects, the lives of all creatures in the world were influenced by that face and changed because of it. Beneath the face of the god, radiance and light slowly faded from the day. The shadows cast by the setting sun created a haze that filled the ruins, covering all the surrounding lands, as if to swallow them whole. The rain fell harder. Suddenly, not feeling in the mood to sleep, he felt around for his sack, found it, and pulled out a bamboo slip from inside. It was dark, but he could feel the text carved into the bamboo, and was thus able to read without light. Sitting up, he started to breathe in a prescribed fashion. This young man was named Shu Qing, and from a very young age he had eked out a living in the slums outside the city. 9 days ago, when the catastrophe struck, he hid in a crevice, and unlike all the terrified people around him, he looked up into the sky at the god and into those open eyes. The god's pupils were shaped like crosses, and upon seeing them, the terror in Shu Qing's heart vanished. It was also at that moment that he saw a violet light descend from the heavens and land somewhere in the northeastern part of the city. Then he passed out. When he woke up, he was the only survivor in the slums. However, he didn't start exploring. He knew that when the god's eyes opened, a forbidden region would form, and when that happened, a rain of blood would fall, forming a boundary around the forbidden region. Because of that boundary, people inside the forbidden region couldn't leave, nor could anyone on the outside come in, at least until the forbidden region was fully formed, and that would happen when the rain stopped. To Shu Qing, who had grown up in rough conditions, this catastrophe wasn't that bad. The slums had been filled with thugs, stray dogs, and plagues. On any freezing night, he could have lost his life. It had always been a struggle to survive. As long as he stayed alive, nothing else mattered. That said, his brutal life in the slums had contained bits of warmth. For instance, there were occasional down-and-out scholars who came to teach classes to the children and instruct them how to read. Shu Qing also had some memories of his family. However, those memories were getting more difficult to hold on to, and he had the feeling that they would fade away eventually. At the very least, he knew he wasn't an orphan. He did have a family. He'd just lost touch with them long ago. In any case, his dream was simply to keep on living. If he could do that, then maybe he could find his family again one day. Given that he'd somehow survived the catastrophe, he decided to go explore the city. He had 2 goals when he set out. The first was to find the city magistrate's mansion, where rumor had it there was a method to become stronger. His second goal was to find the spot where that violet light fell. That method of getting stronger was something everyone in the slums wanted to get. They called it cultivation, and anyone who practiced cultivation was called a cultivator. Becoming a cultivator was Shu Qing's strongest desire, other than reuniting with his family. Cultivators weren't very common. In all his years in the slums, Shu Qing had only ever once glimpsed one off in the distance in the city. One distinctive characteristic of cultivators was that they caused people who looked at them to tremble. Shu King had heard that the magistrate himself was a cultivator, as were all of his guards. 5 days ago, during his search of the city, he finally found the city magistrate's manor, and on a corpse there, he found the very bamboo slip he currently held in his hand. It had been a dangerous adventure, and it ended with him sustaining that grievous wound to the chest. However, the bamboo slip also contained the secrets of cultivation that he had longed for. He had memorized the contents of the slip and had already begun practicing cultivation. Because Shu King knew literally nothing about cultivation to begin with, he wasn't sure if the technique described in the slip was authentic. Thankfully, the text was easy to understand and focused around visualizations and breathing. By following the exact routine, he had already achieved some results. The method was called the Sea and Mountain Incantation. The cultivation method involved visualizing the image inscribed on the bamboo slip and then breathing in a prescribed fashion. The image was strange. It depicted a bizarre creature with a large head, a small body, and a single leg. Its body was pitch black, and its face was vicious, like that of an evil ghost. Shu King had never seen a creature like that in real life, but the bamboo slip described it as a goblin. Not long after he conjured the image in his mind and started breathing, the air around him stirred. Streams of spirit power flowed into him, filling his body, reaching every corner of his being. It caused icy cold to reach his bones, making him feel like he was submerged in ice water. Shu King feared the cold, but he refused to give up and continued with the session of cultivation. Then, after continuing according to the description on the bamboo slip, he ended the session and found that he was sweating. Despite having just eaten the entire vulture, he felt pangs of hunger in his belly. Wiping the sweat off of himself, he rubbed his belly. Ever since he started training in this technique, he found himself getting much hungrier. However, he was also a lot more athletic. Because of that, his tolerance to the cold grew greater. Having finished with cultivation, he looked toward the crack, and beyond it, the outside. It was still dark, and the terrifying sounds outside were waxing and waning. He wasn't sure why he had survived the catastrophe. Maybe it was luck, or maybe it had something to do with that violet light. That was why, even as he continued to train in the new technique, he had traveled all the way to the northeast of the city. However, he had not yet found where the violet light landed. Shu King thought about these matters as he paid attention to the howls outside. He couldn't stop thinking about how he'd found that corpse leaning up against the wall the day before at nightfall. That corpse had been in the northeast section of the city, and it actually looked like a living person. Don't tell me it has something to do with that violet light?